with media failure and media decline. So, what
Okay.
is the state of the media right now, and why is it like this? What has happened? So, it might be relevant with what you say. You just told me that we're not in the Gutenberg area, we're in the Zuckerberg area, from which I infer that social media had something to do with it. But can you like unpack that a little more?
Well, look, my view is very simple. Until we had the era of information, information was the central tool for society, for individual, for knowledge, for science. There was information and that was information. That meant that information has a market value, so that if you printed a newspaper, you could make some money. Also because advertisement, which was nearly 80% of the budget of any newspaper, of the income of every newspaper, and only media were to go. So media were powerful, were money making, and were very professional in general. There was the idea that the media should compete in quality. Even if you are a local newspaper, you always look into the big newspaper as a paradigm of journalism, editorial style, and accountability to the readers, and so on. What has happened since the arrival of Zuckerberg era, that information is not any longer a tool, the tool for the society to have its window over the world. Information was the window over the world, over your town, over your country, over your region, and over the world. The individual was able to read all this and get its conclusion. Of course, there were bias in media. There were right-wing paper, left-wing paper, elite newspaper, popular newspaper, but by and large, that was an horizon which provided the citizen with a view on the world. The radio which came and TV later did not change that much because it was always a system of information. And you could discuss if visual images were more powerful than written words, but that was the problem of which media you would use. Media were all instruments to reach people. You could use radio, TV, newspaper, whatever. With the arrival of Gutenberg era, three things have been happening. The first, all the advertisement went to internet, to Google and so on. In fact, they make their money by selling us as a product. This is how this company makes money. They're free, there is no subscription, and they make the money by using the people as customers for anything from politics to marketing. That made a very, very heavy loss for the information system. And that is something that should never be undervaluated because that loss of financial strength for media meant a second consequence. That to compete with, to stay in the market, information became more and more a market value, a market oriented, with information left by and large process to concentrate on events, gave privilege more and more to known people, not to unknown people. It made a number of selection, which were in fact selection of marketing. And the information became much more market-oriented and market-dependent than before. The third phenomenon about this is the fact that professionally, this profession has been slowly, I would not say disappearing, but certainly it is not a profession that will last for long. When artificial intelligence will arrive, well, you will see that artificial intelligence can do many of the jobs a journalist is doing today. And journalism will disappear as we know now. It will remain in some few outlets, but they will have to go to the digital. Very few will be able to remain printed. And only two kind of newspaper will emerge. The very, very good ones that elite need to read to know what happens. But in the States, there could be 2, 3. In Canada, maybe 2, no more. And then the local newspaper, which are going to be given free, in which you find which pharmacy is open, what is on the movie of your town, information which have to do with your local life. But they will completely abandon any pretension of global coverage of international vision, even of national vision. So the market is changing all this, the second point, but the second point brings to a third point. The arrival of internet has created also a generational difference. Young people don't buy newspaper any longer because they are not able to read any longer in length. They do a lot of scrolling. Microsoft said that today the attention span of a teenager is 7 seconds. That is exactly opposite to what you need to read a newspaper. Unless you make a newspaper of titles of 150 characters like Twitter, because you cannot ask to young people to have more attention than this. We are speaking in general terms, we're not speaking of all young people. We are speaking of the majority of young people. The result is that this other word which has come out, which is a communication word, which is horizontal, in which everybody is equal. You can be the most brilliant scientist, but what you write in the social net has not much more power than somebody who theorizes on a conspiration fantasy. On the contrary, the guy who makes a conspiration fantasy has many more chances to have readers than the scientist. And the search engine of the three big tech are oriented to keep you there as much as possible. So they give you always the most sensational, unusual, exceptional thing to read, because you will be there, you will be there. So there is the system has totally destroyed the content value of information. And with results like the one you know of Mr. Trump, who had 86 million followers in Twitter. He sent sometimes even 20 tweets in a day. And all American media combined make 50 million copies a day. Of these 50 million, 10 million are for the quality paper. New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, something like the Boston are disappearing, the Christian Science Monitor is not any longer printed. I mean, that is a group of newspapers which is slowly reducing. And if you reach 80 million people directly, you do not read the 50 million copies of the press, much less the 10 million copies of the quality paper. Usually overpass them. So the result is that today, journalists, I'm not talking about media, journalists are becoming paid less and less. Today in Europe, we have a lot of young journalists who write articles for 20 euro a piece because they need to get known, so the market exploit them, paying them less. A maid makes 10 euro an hour. So a journalist is paid like 2 hours of a maid. When I became a journalist, my monthly income was 30,000 lira as a young journalist. Well, I was a journalist, some success, but still I had 30,000 lira per month. My secretary costed exactly 30,000 lira per month. And I got 30,000 lira with 2 articles. Today it's the opposite. There is no more contract for unions. Many newspapers do not have a journalistic contract. And the unions are unable to oblige them to adopt a general contract. In Italy now, I do not know how many years that we are working without general contract. So the profession is in decline. The rewards for the profession are in decline. The media are in decline. All this is a word which is going to have very deep changes. I have always a friend of mine who called me and said, Roberto, my son wants to become a journalist. My daughter wants to become a journalist. Can you with them and give advice? I said, wait a moment. First of all, are you able to keep them 14 years paying their life? If you're able to do so, let us go. If not, it's going to be a frustration because they will start to write. They will find media who publish them for a token amount. They cannot live with it. They will have probably a girlfriend, somebody. How do you expect them to survive without your support? So I was reading a few days ago a very interesting article made by artificial intelligence, who was given the keywords and the system, Deep Blue, went over the internet, gathered all elements which are coming from this data, and wrote an article which was how we robot want to reassure human that you are not going to take your place. But then I found out that this was instruction given to DeepMind. Its instruction to DeepMind was write that you robot are going to overtake humanity. They would have, without any problem, written the exactly opposite article. And I have to tell you that was not a very good language because was somehow a mechanical language, but was perfectly published in any newspaper. That was an experiment of just few weeks ago. And once we will have this artificial intelligence going up, and an editor said to the robot, there was a crash of a plane in the town, so write a story, it will be easy for the robot to describe the crash, the cry of horror of people, the ambulance running on the runaway. What is this? Manifestation. If there is a manifestation in the street, they all have the same story. How many people? So for a robot to do this kind of journalism will be very simple. Events, chronicles. And at the same time today to be able to make global journalism is very difficult because I have to tell you, I have to read at least 5 hours every day to have an approximate idea of what is happening in the world. Because you have to know what happens in Asia, in Africa, Latin America, Europe, United States. It takes a lot of reading. And when I write an article, today syndicate service of newspaper does not take anything longer than 650 words. I write articles of 2,000, 2,500 because I have to explain the complexity. I have to bring out a holistic approach. I cannot write about Syria without involving Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. I mean, everything is just many angles of observation. So if I write such article, I don't know where to publish it. And if I get published, El País in Spain, which is the most important newspaper, is paying very good columnists, very famous writers, 80 euro per article. So I have to read 5 hours every day with the hope that I will be paid 80 euro, which is what you need to have a good lunch with a friend. So the decline is a decline by many, many angles. I given you the most important ones. There are also many more, but these are the critical ones.
Thank you. That was incredibly interesting. Another point that you made an emphasis on, and on this one, I'd like you to go back a little bit because I didn't completely got it. And maybe in pocket was the impact of the market on the media.
Well, let me go on the market.
Yeah. Yes, please. Like if and the market, if
that is important.
Anything else, please come back and correct some of the things that I wasn't able to get. So.
Okay. What do you teach the first day of a class of journalism? Who, how, where, why, when? The 5 W. You remember, this is the first thing you learn. In fact, this were to create a code of communication with people which would fulfill these points, which are necessary for people to understand fully an event. But this has nothing to do with analysis. This is how you report, how this happened, why this happened, who was there, when this happened, where this happened. These 5 W are very useful for covering an event. Let us remember that newspapers were competing each other who would be the first to cover an event. Because at that time was a very important element. But this kind of lessons that you get in the journalism school do not prepare you for a more complex work, which is an analytical work. If you write in an article, normally you must go beyond an event. You must put that event in its framework to give to this event a real significance. Otherwise, it's just an event by itself. But events are just the basis of reality. You have to build over this reality to give to the lector, to the reader, the ability to go beyond the event. Let us say the price of tea is increased. Why has been increased? Who are the beneficiary? Who work in the field? Only women. The world change of tea price did affect the life of these women? Where the money of the increase went? Because the news that the tea price increased by 7 cents does not mean anything in itself. So I mean, real journalism is to be able to analyze, gather all the data so that your reader has many elements on which I have to be able to understand. Now, what has been happening at the market has been reducing that kind of journalism because a journalism which costs money, which costs time. If you send a reporter to, let us say now, Yemen, with the reporter, maximum after 2-3 days must start to send articles. Now, go to Yemen and to understand the situation, you will need at least a week. So journalism is becoming more and more superficial because the market does not reward journalism simply because the money is elsewhere. So if you are an editor, a publisher of a newspaper, and you have to survive, you have to make choices. And what choice you make? I will sell what is more simple, not what is more complex. I will sell what is more familiar, not something which I do a lot of explanation to situate the reader with a process. So the quality of journalism has been declining because the market is not rewarding media. The market went elsewhere, went to the social media. And media, to survive, had to cut their qualities, the analysis. Also because at the same time, the people who read have less attention span, less and less time. They are overwhelmed by millions of information, in which they need to choose to be able to find out what they want. And in this, the search engine of Google, Facebook, does not help because they do not help you to find what is more important, but what is more glamorous. So the market has changed the relation of the media with the reader and of the media with the quality. when Prensa Latina, the press agency of Cuba, was started, it was started by a guy who was an Argentinian journalist. Went there, and there was still the dictatorship of Batista. So he dressed as a priest to reach the guerrilla zone. He spent some day with Fidel Castro and so on. So he went out and wrote a book about the guerrilla, which was the first book to explain what was really happening. Because until then, the American press agencies were pro-Batista, not for Fidel Castro, of course. So this guy was called Massetti. Massetti went back to Cuba when there was the end of the dictatorship. And he made a program on radio saying, this is terrible, nobody knows the situation in Cuba because journalists write about Cuba from outside. American front is united against Fidel Castro, therefore Europe follows, about some intellectuals. So one day Che Guevara called him, they were both at home. He said to Massetti, you know why? Make a press agency so we can rebut AP, UP, all this world of international agencies. And Massetti was not a real big journalist and not a manager, found himself in charge of creating a news agency. What he did, he took the best people in Latin America, Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the best people, and hired them as journalists. And Prensa Latina made articles much, much, much superior to what was circulating. They were written by artists, really important artists. And what I did was, I told you, they had a map of the towns of all Latin America. And then they went to a flash who said, there is now a manifestation in Guatemala about this, a flash. So they took the map of the town of Guatemala and they wrote an article. In front of the people that are filing, there is a group of young people who are shouting, freedom, freedom. The police is charging from the street. They were inventing everything. But as all manifestations go like this, the story went in AP, France Press, that Prensa Latina had planes who parachuted journalists in the moment of events to cover this event. There were a few people in Havana and nowhere. To tell you that the description of an event is simple, because it's always the same. Analysis of an event is very complicated. And to have an analysis of an event, you must have A guy able to do it, B, a newspaper able to publish it, C, a public interest in reading it. These three things have been declining. And that is the real decline of journalism.
Thank you. If I could, I would ask some questions about some stories that are out there floating, which have to do with the decline, just to get your perspective on them. So one of them is kind of, I'm going to bundle it together. So it is the view that like Noam Chomsky has about propaganda and like manufacturing consent. And it also goes into what Edward Bernays did. I mean, how public relations in the United States like took this like propagandist view. And
Sorry, it depends from which angle you look at this issue. If you look from the angle of a journalist and of a media, the answer is very simple. There have always been two powers who try to control communication. The state and the market. People with commercial interest try to control media to enhance their commercial interest. People with the political view try to use media to present their political view. And it is with the arrival of mass media that this starts. If you take the Times of, let's say, 1820, the Times was a newspaper for elite. It sold 25,000 copies. Was extremely well written. Once they were writers, were also journalists. Now this does not exist anymore. So the Citizen Kane, who invents a war with Cuba, is a manipulation. But all the time, people of financial power or people of political interest try to control the media. That, of course, if you look by a sociological point of view, is a much wider phenomenon, which is how the system tries to reach and control societies. In that sense, until the 50s, the 950, media were the only conduit. So they were much more important than today. So again, from looking to the society as such, media was not really, well, it was important because there were other things, but you have a lot of other techniques to reach people. But look them, once the technique were what? You had to write a book about a fake book like the Wise of Zion to have people becoming anti-Semitist. But that was Gutenberg era. You had to print a book, distribute the book, organize a system to make political propaganda or voice in the street. Now, you have 1,000 ways of making political propaganda. Fake news are the best example. We have today a number of fake news every day who come on our screen, which are impressive. Look how Bannon or Trump have used media, social media, overtaking over the media to convince people that there has been fraud in elections. Did he care about media? I didn't care at all. And yet he was able to reach 71 million people. And today, 83% of the Republicans believe that there has been a fraud. So this is something which goes from Goebbels' time. But Goebbels, as a minister of Hitler, to reach people, could only use radio, mass manifestation, and media. Today, for Goebbels, will be immensely easier to do a job. Because you, in this world of Zuckerberg, everything is equal. There is no any longer value system.
So I relate to it, like I understand there was always two powers that were trying to capture the media, which is the corporate, we could say, and the state. But at the same time, the people are the ones that are supposed to be able to control or at least elect the state, who's supposed to keep the market in check. So two questions arise for me from that, or emerge. The corporate and the market, Wall Street was trying to capture the state and control what's happening. So are they different at this point? And how does this relate into the world?
Sorry, here you have to make a very basic difference. There are three angles. The first, if you are in a democracy or in a autocratic or dictatorial regime. In the dictatorial regime, the state and the market coincide. The Chinese economy coincide with the state. This is not the situation, let us say, of United States. But in the United States, the value system of Trump and the corporation is very much the same. So in democracy, you can have a value system where both interests coincide, or both interests don't coincide at all. In Argentina, corporations are always against the government. And in Chile, the corporation basically are by the side of the government. I mean, when the government has the same value over the economy than the market, there is no difference. What is important to note in all this is how things have changed since the arrival of the Zuckerberg era. Because the Zuckerberg era has created a system unknown in history, in which readers become objects, become consumer. The citizen becomes first a consumer, because it pushes you to buy this and this, but also you become an object because it classifies you by your interest, your choices, your taste, and group you together with similar people. So if Nestle want to sell a very good chocolate, go there and say, who are the people who have exquisite taste? And Google will say, okay, I can give you 2 million email. How much you give me? And so we become objects. We are not any longer a consumer. This with information was impossible. Was impossible. So this has changed the relation between market and media. Media become not relevant as before. Social media become more relevant. But what is the value system of the great Silicon Valley Corporation? Exactly the same of the profit, which is what is shared by fossil company like coal company. You said to me, coal company has nothing to do with Zuckerberg. Up to a point, because they, in real life, they share the same interest. So if you want to make a newspaper, you have the usual traditional attack of the corporation. But now you have a new attack, which is the domination without precedent of people by few technological companies. Today, Facebook has 2 billion readers, billion users. I mean, China has 1.350 billion people. The world of Facebook are more. And they globalize the world and put people from Africa, Asia, Latin America in the same category group. So they're standardizing the world. The world will become less and less democratic because democracy is made by pluribus viewpoints, and from this debate among pluribus viewpoints comes democracy. Today we are having less and less viewpoints, and differences between regions are slowly disappearing. You go to Japan, go to a Japanese marriage. There is nothing, or it is a traditional Japanese marriage, or it's Western marriage, Western music, Western style. All this is due to the globalization, which has a political value, neoliberal value, but a technological value, which is this extraction companies, Google, Facebook, and so on. So sociologically, we are going in the same direction.
I feel this is a very interesting point, but I think that now we're going more in the political part than the media role part. So I'll try to bring it back to the subject, which is the media role part, because I have a million more questions about just this, like everything that you just said now. But perhaps that can I can keep it for like another time. Or the media role is like the ones that are so this is a harder question, because it's kind of like a how to question. The media is the one who is supposed to inform the public and the people so that they can exert, in a democratic society at least, some kind of checking and control and elections on the state. So if the media is captured either by the state, either by the market, either by both, either completely in a state of completely in this state where the Zuckerberg era, as you call it, has like so many like points of views, which are like the glamour one that counts, not the real ones that count. And journalists can't like actually make like good informative pieces out there. Like, what hope do you see for us, and what path do you see for us out of this vicious circle, I would call it, in order to have good information so that people can have good perspectives of realities, so they can elect good officials, so that the officials can.
I told you. Yes, I told you there will be few high quality newspapers. In the United States, there will be 3. New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal. I don't think many more will survive. And then you will have the use of the net to distribute specialized information. I made an experiment myself with other news. I started to distribute to my friends every day 2 news, 2 items, which are analytical, which would not normally come out in a newspaper. Well, I have 20,000 people who read the other news because they find out that somebody read for them lot of news of items, select 2, and save a lot of work for them. The same will happen with people interested in how to destroy plastic. If there is a good service which keeps today how to destroy plastic, we'll have lots of people who go there because they have a specific interest. Other news is a globalist. There will not be many globalists. The example of Anelu is a good example. We never made any advertisement, but we have 20,000. That's nothing. It's a lot because there are people who read long and complex material. But that is the limit. So I think in the future there will be few high quality newspaper, some system of information will use internet to give information on specialized issue, global issue in which people from every part of the world can identify it. Climate change. If you have a good system of climate change, you will have people from Latin America, Africa, Asia. But this is a problem. Nobody pays anything on internet. Everybody is accustomed to get it free. And if you want to introduce a system of subscription, you must go like New York Times now, I think is $2 per month, 0.49 per week, something like this. So with this, you will never be able to get the money that you had before with advertisement, which is good, to pay really good investigative journalists. You will have material that you will pick up from here, from there. And that will be a engine made by the humans. Will search the most significant material on a theme, on a subject, and put that together for a world audience which is shaping up. That is what I think will happen. Few high quality papers and the number of information system, not communication, because in other news, for instance, we don't ask readers to give their view. It is not an horizontal space. We use internet as a vertical system. Because if you open as a horizontal space, you're going to become crazy. We're going to have people writing the most extravagant stories, and we have to answer them. Then you must have people able to answer with competence and common sense that cost money. So my point is that we do not have any longer the means for good journalism unless in few cases.
Okay, thank you. I am I'm subscribed myself to Other News, and I've been enjoying it. I trust Other News because I know that you do it. But for other ones, I'm not really sure myself how I would build my trust in this era of untrust where there's so many things. That's because there's those main newspapers that you said, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, and they have been losing like a lot of like readership and trust, I would say. So I'm not even sure myself, should I read the New York Times? Is there value in reading the New York Times, the Washington? Is there value in reading them? And if we do not read those who have some kind of like, I assume bias, I'm not sure how bad it is, but I think it's like pretty bad. how do we find this alternative medias like other news in which we can trust, or how do we build trust in them? Like, I know how to trust other news because I know you, but how do I trust other ones? Like, there's
Well,
so many.
you have to look for 4 questions. One, who is the owner? How is the ownership? If the ownership is divided among different people, you will have more trust that is one person. Second, is a profit, for profit, what it is? What is the goals? Which are the goals of this association? And 4, how much is accountable to its members? These are the 4 questions. So in other news, we say we are a non-profit. We are an association of journalists. Any reader can become a member of the association and vote for the board. Here are our budget, which are transparent, and this usually solves many of the problems. Of course, people will ask, these people are right-wing, left-wing, believe in God, do not believe in God, and this you cannot avoid because that is how we have been dividing readers today thanks to Facebook, Google. People are dividing bubbles. And people of bubble A will try to understand if you can be put in that bubble A or you are too far from bubble A. But you know what will happen? Trust will happen having this question answered. Who are the owner? Why does it a publication? I did that choosing the famous 5W that we were taught at school. Why there is this publication? Who is making this publication? Where is made this publication? For what is made this publication? When you answer this issue, well, you have been playing as fair as you can.
Okay, so my last question is about one last perspective on the media decline, which is out there, flowing everywhere, that I've seen, and that I wonder like how you relate to it, if you've seen it, if you haven't. And there's this storyline which I'll try to resume, and I'm not very good at resuming things, but I'll do my best. It's the postmodernism explanation. So there is this storyline that slowly after the fall of the fall of communism, I guess, or like when communism was shown to do atrocious things because it became Stalinism, the Marxist view from intellectuals like Michel Foucault and like others, like they went into a postmodernism phase, saying there is no such thing as reality, there is no such thing as a story that isn't viewed from a certain point of view. And this has evolved through the ages. So the postmodernist view isn't exactly the same. It has evolved. It has kind of gone from intellectuals into like left activism and the left progressive activism. And now there's a lot of factions who are putting forward a lot of stories.
The problem is that this, which is a conceptual issue, coincide with a particular moment of our history, which is that we have been going from the fall of communism, from the fall of Berlin Wall, into 20 years of absolute neoliberalism without any criticism, capitalism without any control, unchecked capitalism. Not only, but the state was an enemy, society was an enemy. Capitalism was the solution to having the market replace the man, and this went on for 20 years without any debate. Then, in 2008, we had the financial crisis. And then fear started to come. Fear to the immigrants, which became the scapegoat. Fear to, would I find a job? What will be my life? Will I be able to have a pension when I retire? Young people especially had a lot of incertitude and fears. And when you put greed and fear together, you put the two engines of history in march, in function. So while we have this thing going on, parallel to the various factions of what you are talking, of the post-modernist world, there was another factor coming, which in my view was much more relevant than the intellectual debate, which was that people started to do not believe any longer in anything which could be accused of cooperating with elite. The people of the countryside were against the town. There was class divide in the town. There was a group who thought that red meat is a serious problem. People who thought that serious problem were some. I mean, there were a lot of one single issue faction. And this one single faction were much, much more numerous and much more emotional than the debate of postmodernism. So I think that what you were saying has been deluged in this world in which we are, which is a world of transition to where, frankly, I do not know. But I know that the system in which we are is finished. There's no more legitimacy, there's more credibility, and it is not participation of people. Today, people are totally separate from the official structures. So I think that what you say should be seen as part of a much wider sociological, cultural, and even anthropological change. Today, if you take I was last week with some friends who have a 5-year-old girl. So we're eating, and this girl was sitting at the table. 10 o'clock, I say, when do you go to sleep? She says, 8. But it's 10 o'clock. She says, but when I'm grown up, I like to stay because I like to hear the conversation. Now, we are talking of the crisis of Middle East. So I was very surprised. I said to this, how old are you? She says, 5. So I do not know what to say. I say, well, it's a good age. She pointed the finger across the table and said to me, it's the most difficult age. Which, if you ask me which is the most difficult age, I have to think quite a bit because now then they said, well, bring her to bed. So I bring her to bed and she goes to bed because with me she would go to bed. And she said, tell me a tale. Now, as I have no sons, I do not know stories for children. I did remember something about white nature, you remember? Well, the story of a girl with a red hat, which goes in a wood with a wolf, the grandmother. Do you remember? Red Hood, I think it's called.
Yes, the Red Riding Hood.
So I invent a new Red Hood. And when I say, and then Red Hood gets lost in the wood. She look at me and say, and why she didn't call by telephone? Now, that is an anthropological change, because if you look the things with the eyes of this girl, little girl, Romeo and Juliet would not have happened. Juliet would have called Romeo and say, look, I'm going to take a drug which is going like I'm dead. Don't worry, I'm not dead. Just wait a little bit and I will awake. Romeo would not have killed himself. Juliet would not have killed himself. We would have no Romeo and Juliet. So it is a new anthropological, cultural society which is coming up, which artificial intelligence is going to make disappearing many jobs. It's going to be a society which I can only foresee. So your question is not what is happening now, but what will happen in 20 years, not 100, 20. When cars will drive by themselves, you will have no more drivers. Your time will be very different, because you will be working mainly not to social contact, but on internet. I mean, it's a different society. It will be different people. So make a little projection of that question.
Amazing. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for everything. I think we should keep it at that for today. You've been very, very generous of your time, and you've given me a lot of points to like think about. So thank you very, very much.